Okay, so we're going deep today into some pretty unsettling stuff. U.S. foreign policy. We've got leaked USAI files, reports, analyses, really eye-opening stuff. Ready to unpack it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see how all these different players, government agencies, contractors, NGOs, even media, all connect.
And how that impacts not just foreign policy, but domestic stuff too, right?
Yeah.
One thing that keeps popping up, soft power. What does that even mean?
So soft power, it's a country's ability to influence others, not through force, but through attraction, persuasion, shaping global perceptions, through cultural exchanges, promoting values, building alliances.
So less about military, more about winning hearts and minds.
Exactly. But the question is, where's the line between soft power and straight-up manipulation?
Right, because some of these USAID's programs, they're pretty shocking, funding like transgender dance festivals in Bangladesh.
Yeah, that's a good example of what critics call cultural imperialism, trying to impose U.S. values on other cultures, which can backfire, create resentment.
But USAID also funds more traditional development projects too, right? Like infrastructure, healthcare.
Yeah, but even those aren't without problems. The files show projects that were mismanaged, funds misappropriated, questionable impact.
So even good intentions can go wrong.
Absolutely. It shows how complex this all is. International development, allocating aid. It raises questions about oversight, accountability. Are they achieving their goals?
And it goes beyond mismanagement, right?
Yeah.
There are allegations of political motivations, even ties to intelligence agencies.
Yeah, that's where it gets really murky. Evidence suggesting USAID funding, used to support opposition groups, influence elections, even destabilize regimes. That's a far cry from humanitarian aid.
Wow, so it's not just wells and schools. This is serious geopolitical stuff. What does this mean for the average American?
It raises questions about transparency, accountability. Are our tax dollars being used responsibly? Are these actions really in our interest? And what are the consequences?
And these sources don't stop at foreign policy. They talk about the impact on domestic politics, too, this whole astroturfing thing.
Yeah, astroturfing. It's basically creating the illusion of grassroots support for a cause or agenda, funding seemingly independent groups, manipulating media narratives to sway public opinion.
So it's like a facade, making it seem like there's more support than there is.
Exactly. And the sources suggest these tactics, used in foreign policy, like astroturfing, they might be seeping into our own politics.
And they point to Black Lives Matter as an example.
Yeah, some sources raise the question whether foreign entities tried to exploit or manipulate those protests for their own purposes.
That's a chilling thought, especially with all the division we're already seeing.
It makes you worry about our democracy, how vulnerable it is to outside influence. It highlights the importance of critical thinking, media literacy, being able to tell genuine movements from manufactured ones.
So we've got USAI potentially impacting events both abroad and at home. What about the media? What's their role in all this?
Well, the sources reveal a trend, a concerning one. Government entities like USA funding media outlets, both domestic and international.
So it's not just spreading information, it's about shaping the narrative.
Exactly. This funding influences what stories get covered, the angles, even the language. It creates a conflict of interest, compromises journalistic independence.
And the sources specifically mention Politico as a recipient of USAID funding.
Yeah, and they question whether that funding influenced Politico's coverage of U.S. foreign policy, created a bias towards the government's agenda.
So it's not just what's reported, but what's left out UT.
Exactly. And that shapes public perception, how we understand complex issues like foreign policy.
The sources also talk about this revolving door between government agencies and private contractors.
Right, that's the movement of people between government decisions and the private sector, especially in areas related to foreign policy, national security.
So someone might work at USASI, then go work for a contractor bidding on USAID projects.
Exactly, creating potential conflicts of interest, people with inside knowledge, leveraging that for personal gain, or influencing decisions to favor certain companies.
And the sources say this revolving door contributes to lack of accountability, oversight within USAID.
Exactly. It blurs the lines between public service and private profit, leading to decisions that prioritize profit over the best interests of the American people.
This is all pretty overwhelming. What can the average person even do about this?
Well, one of the most important things is to become an informed and engaged citizen. Educate yourself about foreign policy, USAA, all the issues we've been discussing.
So read the news, do some research, maybe even check out alternative media.
Exactly. The more you understand, the better equipped you are to critically evaluate information, form your own opinions. And don't be afraid to contact your elected officials, voice your concerns, let them know you care about these issues, and expect them to act in your best interest.
So be proactive, not just passive consumers of information.
Absolutely. It's about taking ownership
Yeah.
of your role in the democratic process, demanding transparency and accountability.
So we've laid out the problems.
Yeah.
But where do we go from here? What are some solutions to these issues with USAA and U.S. foreign policy?
That's the million-dollar question. The sources offer a range of solutions, from increased congressional oversight to completely restructuring USA.
So some say reform, others say scrap the whole thing.
Yeah, and there are valid arguments on both sides. Some believe with proper oversight, accountability, USA can still be a force for good. Others argue it's too entrenched in corruption. Manipulation needs a fresh start.
No easy answers, that's for sure. But these leaked files have opened a Pandora's box, revealed a side of U.S. foreign policy most Americans had no idea about.
And that's a crucial first step. Bringing these issues to light allows for informed public debate and hopefully meaningful reform.
So shining a light on the shadows, demanding accountability, reclaiming control.
Exactly, ensuring our actions on the world stage align with our values, serve the best interests of the American people, both at home and abroad.
Which brings up a big question. What are those interests? How do we define them? Yeah, it's not just America first. It's more complicated than that. These sources show how interconnected everything is. What happens over there affects us here in ways we don't even realize.
Absolutely. Sometimes chasing short-term gains or narrow interests can hurt us in the long run.
Like in chess. You're so focused on one pawn, you miss the checkmate coming.
Exactly. The sources talk about trade deals. They might benefit big corporations, but cause job losses here, economic hardship.
And that hardship can lead to resentment, instability, more problems down the line.
It's a domino effect. We need a bigger vision for foreign policy, long-term, thinking about all Americans.
So looking beyond just the bottom line, seeing the ripple effects.
Exactly. And understanding the countries, the cultures we're dealing with. So many projects fail because they ignore local context, customs.
Trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
That's where genuine cultural exchange matters, not imposing our values, but understanding, finding common ground.
So building relationships based on respect, give and take.
Precisely. That's where things like educational exchanges come in. People-to-people diplomacy, collaborating on science, technology.
Finding those win-win scenarios.
Exactly. The sources suggest this approach, though often overlooked, can be way more effective than just force.
Soft power done right.
Exactly. Building bridges, not walls.
These sources also talk about the military-industrial complex, its influence on foreign policy.
Right, that's the intertwined interests of the military, defense contractors, politicians, all benefiting from military spending.
So this cycle, everyone wants more spending, whether it's good for the country or not.
Exactly. They have a vested interest in a hawkish policy, even if it means going to war, when other options might be better.
Like that saying, if all you have is a hammer.
Exactly. This mindset leads to costly wars, unnecessary wars, draining our resources, damaging our reputation.
So questioning the motives behind interventions, making sure they truly serve U.S. interests.
Not just the profits of contractors.
Exactly, and exploring alternatives to war, diplomacy, sanctions, economic aid. And that brings us to Congress. They're supposed to oversee all this, hold the executive branch accountable.
Right, but the sources are worried about Congress dropping the ball, giving the president a blank check for war.
Like the parents left town, and the kids are in charge.
Exactly. We need to reassert Congress's role, restore the balance of power, make sure war is the last resort.
And what about us, the American people?
In the end, we bear the cost. Lives lost, resources spent.
And our reputation in the world.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and watch. We have to be informed, engaged, hold our leaders accountable.
So paying attention, speaking out, voting. For candidates who share our values, demanding a better foreign policy.
Exactly. Reclaiming our role as citizens. Shaping a future where our foreign policy is a force for good, not endless conflict and instability.
So we've covered a lot. USAID, soft power, the military-industrial complex. But let's bring it back to you, the listener. What can you do with all this? It's easy to feel overwhelmed, powerless, when you see these huge problems.
Yeah, it can be a lot. But I think even though these sources are bleak, they also offer hope, just by bringing these issues to light.
Right, like shining a light into a dark corner. You see what's there, and then you can deal with it.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more you understand these systems, the better you can challenge them.
So don't give up. Use this knowledge. Become a more informed, active citizen.
Exactly. Talk about this with people, your friends, family.
Share what you learned. Ask questions.
Don't be afraid to bring up the uncomfortable stuff.
The stuff people don't want to talk about. The more we talk, the less power it has.
And your vote matters.
Yeah.
Research the candidates, their foreign policy stances. Support the ones who align with your values.
Hold your elected officials accountable. Write to them, call, go to town halls.
Let them know you're watching. You expect them to represent you, not special interests or foreign powers.
And if you're really fired up, support organizations fighting corruption, promoting transparency, advocating for a better foreign policy.
There are so many great groups out there doing amazing work with very little.
Your time, donations, your voice can make a difference.
Every action, even small ones, add up. Create a wave of change.
This isn't just politics, it's about humanity.
Decisions made in Washington affect real people all over the world.
It's about understanding how connected we are. Our actions have an impact globally.
So as you process all this, be critical but also compassionate.
Never underestimate your power to change things.
Well said. It's been great diving into this with you.
It really has, and thank you, listener, for joining us.
Okay.
As we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away?
Don't be complacent. Stay informed, stay engaged, hold our leaders accountable.
Reclaim your power as a citizen. Demand a foreign policy that serves U.S.
Exactly. Time for Americans to wake up
Wow.
and take back their country.
Well said. We'll leave you with this. Imagine a world where American foreign policy is driven by good, not greed or ideology. A world where we use our power to help people.
A vision worth fighting for.
Absolutely, rooted in the best of America. And I believe we can achieve it together.
Thanks for this talk.
It's been a pleasure. Subscribe to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear.